Welcome to Beyond the Syllabus, where we talk with superintendents, curriculum leaders, and education innovators who are rethinking what school can be and how it can better serve the academic and personal needs of every learner. Hi everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Syllabus. Today with me, I have John Roach, who currently serves as the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services in San Jacinto Unified School District in California. With over 28 years in education, John brings a unique skill set founded in a strong instructional background with an innovative and data-driven mindset. John supports instruction with a deep understanding of how to design, implement, and sustain effective systems for improvement. Prior to his current position, he led assessment and data analysis, education technology, curriculum and instruction, and served as a principal, assistant principal, and elementary school teacher. Jack of all trades, John Roach. How we doing, man? Thank you for joining
I'm doing
us.
pretty good. I'm excited to be here and have an opportunity to share some of the things we're doing.
Likewise, man. Super excited to learn about you, your background, and all the amazing work that's going on in San Jacinto. So let's start at the very beginning here. Take me back to little kid John back in elementary school. Did you think you were going to be in education?
You know, it's interesting. If you go back really far when I was a young child, I don't know if I would answer that. I think as I got into my high school years, absolutely. One of the stories that's probably a little bit unique for me that I've shared with other individuals is my third grade teacher was Barbara Morgan, who some people recognize that name, but back when I was younger in the late 70s and early 80s, they were working on the Teacher in Space program. And my third grade teacher was the backup to the Challenger situation, where unfortunately it was tragic, and eventually got to be a teacher that went into space. I share that because it's pretty unique that when I was that age, the thing that I remember was her turning the classroom environment into our own solar system with paper mache planets. And
Wow.
it was very kind of a hands-on, basically project-based learning that I just stands out as such a strong memory for me, to be able to be a young student and to have that hands-on experience and engage with your teacher in that way. Um, so as I got older, life takes turns, and came from an environment that was very had its challenges. And so when I got into my high school years, really leaned into school. It was my safe space. And so by that point, I absolutely knew that I wanted to go into education. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. My original dream, I thought I was going to be a middle school teacher, like one of my coaches for track, and coach track and basketball. Like that's where I thought I would be. And then just as you get into education and you start to see the different things that are going on, and I moved back to California. Um, I ended up moving through and being a teacher, and then eventually an administrator. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So did you play basketball growing up as well?
yeah, I'd like to say that I was better than I probably was. I was a young student. I graduated actually at 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
So probably would have been nice if I had another year and a
Yep.
little bit older student. Maybe would have helped in the athletics.
Yep.
But everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, my dad always joked to my mom that he wanted to hold me back for that reason, and she's like, he'll be so bored. You can't do that to him. But that's pretty funny. So, did you grow up in Southern California as well, or are you from elsewhere?
No, so I'm actually, ironically, I was born in Southern California, and then my family moved to Idaho. So I grew
Oh,
up
wow.
in central and northern Idaho, little town of McCall, which when I was a kid was unknown. Since then, they've become known for things like they held X Games there one time. And then Coeur d'Alene in northern Idaho is where I went to high school and then eventually college in Moscow. And again, not really known when I was younger, but then now it's kind of become a popular area for celebrities and the golf
Yeah.
course and all kinds of things. And then as soon as I graduated, I think I'd had enough of winter and winter sports and scraping my window of my car. So I decided it was time to head back to Southern California, where I took a job as a teacher.
There you go. Yeah, definitely no window scraping in SoCal. So
No.
good move there.
Yeah.
So I always think back to like my athletic experiences. I think it really drives me as a leader, just as someone who pursues a passion and a mission. How would you say like your basketball experience, your athletic career has shaped who you are now as a leader?
That's a great question. I would have to say for me, um, athletics for me obviously taught team. It taught collaboration. It taught being able to accept failure, because at the end of the day, fail is first attempt in learning. You realize in athletics you're not the best, even if you're really good. You learn in athletics that even if you have a lot of natural talent, you still have to work hard. because
Hmm.
somebody else is working harder for you, harder than you to try to beat you. And I think it's the for me athletics, along with just some situations growing up, you have to develop grit. And that's that one thing that we always struggle with. How do you teach students grit? Like, how do you teach them to persevere, to keep trying? Um, and that's something that I would definitely say back from being an athlete at my younger age and having a lot of coaches and mentors that you know, brush yourself off, get up and get back in. So I have a lot of, scars from falling and scraping my knees, but um that's what I think it takes into today for me is if something doesn't work the first time for me, I'm not one that says, okay, well, we'll just kind of abandon it. I'm much more strategic and more intentional with, okay, so that didn't work that way. What do I need to do to reflect and revise and adapt and then go back out and keep practicing? And
100%.
and so that's I think definitely something that's led into my leadership and the way that I really try to operate daily.
Yeah, 100%. And for me, I love that you mentioned failure. And the way I look at it is it's all about iteration and repetition, right? I always say no basketball player ever walks into a gym, puts up one shot, and goes home.
Yeah.
That's not how practice works, right? And translating this over to education, it kind of feels like that's what we expect out of students from a practice standpoint, right? We send them home with homework, we give them classwork. It feels very one and done. There's not a lot of opportunity for iteration and repetition there. And so that's built into kind of my pedagogical beliefs. But yeah, super cool to hear kind of how your athletic experience is translated there. I want to talk more specifically about your role at San Jacinto. Obviously, assistant superintendent, been in this position for 7 years, right?
Yes, 7 years.
7 years. So, how would you say your leadership style has evolved over the course of those 7 years? Obviously, bigger districts, working with a lot of staff and students as well. How would you say your leadership style has evolved?
I would have to say that my leadership style continues to evolve in the premise of trying to find ways to streamline and simplify the message of what you just described, that iteration process.
Mm-hmm.
So, through my leadership experience, I've had a lot of, uh, professional growth training, whatever you want to call it, in really improvement science and implementation science and really how people learn. And at the end of the day, it's like reading. There's a known process on how people learn, especially if they're a struggling learner to read. Yet many times we avoid that because what's happening is people want to put their own spin or their own part on it. But so I really try to go back and think of, okay, what does the evidence show us? What does the research show us? What's something that you're doing that, back to that sports analogy, that we could tweak just a little bit to make it more effective. And the reason I say that, even we know how people learn, there's a process in how people learn information. Like you said, someone doesn't just walk out the first time and get it the first time. Even people who have strong natural talent, they're going to hit some point where they need that level of support. And if it's being done with intentionality, if it's being done through that iterative process, then you're going to have better results.
100%. 100%. You got to put the reps in, right? There's always the notion of 10,000 hours. And I think building that persistence and grit, as you mentioned, to understand like, hey, you're not going to get it the first time out there, but don't be discouraged, right? You're just peeling back layers of the onion there. So that's super cool. Let's talk about some of the academic initiatives going on at San Jacinto. What are some things you guys are hyper focused on right now?
That's a great question. For our community, we're a high needs community. We average our unduplicated student count hovers are actually around 90%. So we have a high student population of students that are on an IEP. We have a high population of students that are English learners, and so what we're really focused on when we look at our data, and really across the board, academic, social, emotional behavior. What we really are focusing on through my division, I'm over educational services, is improving what we call quality first instruction. We want to make sure, like I was saying, there's a process on how people learn. There's evidence-based strategies that we want to be replicating. We want teachers to be able to connect with students on social emotional level and relationships that improve behavior. So what we really done is we've created a quantifiable model of what quality first instruction looks like. And then it allows us to be able to go in, actually observe instruction, and then give feedback through that iterative cycle that you talked about in a very intentional way, rather than it being feeling based. And the reason that's important for me is because spend a number of years in my career where as a teacher I'd have maybe somebody come in and do my evaluation or observation, and they would talk about how wonderful my room environment is, or something that they liked about that was on a bulletin board, but they weren't getting to the core of was I actually engaging students? Was I actually were the students learning what I needed them to learn? And the most critical part for us right now is ensuring that students can read. For me, you talked a little bit before we went on air about like vision. For me, it's about building brighter futures, and it's about having access. And you cannot have access if you cannot read. If you are not able to read the information sent to you, how do you really interact in society? And so when we look at our data and we see the percentage of students that are not reading, that's where we're really hyper focused at our primary level. And then as we get into the upper grades, we're really looking at how do we continue to support that so that students not only are reading as far as decoding, but they're actually able to understand and comprehend complex text. So it's just been really the passion for me since I've come to the district, something that each year we try to narrow and improve. Um, but that's really where we're at, is just making sure that we see consistency kind of across our district in those highly effective strategies.
Yeah, I like that line that you used of if you can't read, you don't or if you don't read, you don't have access, right? It's I mean, and it's so true. And literacy is obviously something across the country that a lot of people are focusing on and are having a lot of problems with. So kudos to you guys for maneuvering through that. When it comes to project-based real-world learning, you mentioned that a transformative memory for you as a kid in grade school was your teacher who kind of set up the classroom in a real-world way, right? Are things like that going on in San Jacinto as well?
They are. I will have to be truthful that for us, it's really more of a focus on, uh, we use the term providing the core curriculum as designed.
Hmm.
And the reason that that's so important is uh, if I haven't learned something through different models, take back to that sports analogy, then I need someone to explicitly model it for me. We really focus on the gradual release of responsibility model, which is kind of an I do, we do, you do model. Um, where we want to make sure that teachers are modeling correctly those pieces, building that collaborative environment in their classroom where the students have an opportunity to engage. What we know about how people learn is it's collaborative, and
Hmm.
context is important. So, but the magic for the teachers is how do you make something that has to happen, that has to be taught explicitly, still come alive for the student? And that's where the school environment, the room environment, the way that they interact with the students, um, it's we've had conversations recently about learning to read is not really it's not something that's glamorous, right? It's not something that you typically see people put up on a billboard and say, look at all these great things.
Yeah.
But how you do it, like how you build around that is. And my response to that when people say, well, teaching kids to read isn't the magic part, but um, until you see it click in a kid's eyes. And
Yeah.
then what happens is suddenly a whole new world opens up for them because something that they weren't able to make sense, that ability to read something on a page and have it not only decode it, be able to have it make sense. Because at the end, that's what we want. We want students to be producers. We wanted to create their own learning. And so you can't get there until that foundational piece is there. So I'd love to
100%.
say that we're having, I'd say at our secondary level, much more of a um, project-based learning, much more life experiences. Uh, but for us, it's still starting at that foundational level of we need to make sure everybody's able to read.
100%. 100%. And as you kind of transition into later grades, right? Maybe when the literacy, everyone is sharing at least some level of foundational literacy, right? How are you thinking about differentiation or individualization? Is that a focus for you guys at all? Kind of understanding the whole child and adapting?
It absolutely is. Part of what we've built is really a framework where we focus on that social emotional behavior and the academic needs of the students. and then really being intentional with when and where students need specific scaffolds to access information. The challenge was sometimes when we're talking instruction, people want to apply a scaffold, but then they make it permanent. And so, how do we really work on? I'm struggling to learn this concept or skill. So the teacher needs to know which scaffold to provide. It's back to that tool belt conversation, right? They need to be able to utilize the right tool at the right time with the
Mhm.
right student. And then they need to be able to know when it's time to pull back on that because the image that comes to my mind is a building when you're going to have work done. You put up a scaffold to help strengthen that building when you're doing a remodeling, but you take the scaffold down. If you don't and it's up there forever, it becomes part of the permanent structure. So one of my concerns in my position is we see that sometimes occur with students that are on an IEP. We put things with good intention behind it. We're going to give an accommodation. We might even modify a part of it, but then it becomes something we never really move back from that, and so
Mhm.
then the student ends up really going through that cycle, and then it becomes how they're always expected to operate. Um, and at the end of the day, what we want is people to be independent learners. We want metacognition. We want people that can reflect on their own learning. They can think about, I'm understanding this, I'm not, and then they can apply those different scaffolds on their own. Because at the end of the day, we want kids to have opportunities after graduation. Well, they're not going to be able to have the same opportunities if they're leaving. They're expecting that there's all these different supports and scaffolds uh, in life. The reality is they are, but you have to be able to actually go out and know when to apply them and how to apply them.
I wanna clip like the last 90 seconds there and just play it on repeat because that was so good. That line about if you leave the scaffolding up too long, it becomes part of the permanent structure. That is so powerful, and I think something that is really difficult in a lot of educational organizations. I was just having a conversation the other day about how we're really good at identifying kids that need intervention, but we're not as good at understanding or getting them to the point where we can take them out of intervention, right? And you mentioned it regarding IEPs. Yeah, that was, I love everything you just said. That was
Well, the,
amazing.
the intervention model needs to be fluid. If
Yeah.
if you put me where I need support, so go back to the sports analogy again. If I'm struggling, like some famous basketball players with free throws, and then you put me into an intensive support structure to be able to learn how to shoot a free throw better, the expectation is at some point I'm doing it well enough to come out of that intensive support and move into maybe target another area of my development that needs to be done. If you leave me in free throw camp for the rest of my life, then what happens is other areas of my game start to deteriorate.
Yeah.
So that's what you see happen in schools is if I'm struggling with self-regulation as a younger child but all you ever do is focus on self-regulation, now I'm going to have an academic gap because you're
Yeah.
constantly trying to intervene my behavior
Yeah.
versus my academic learning. So
Yeah.
and that's where the challenge of education for me comes in. How do you cannot delegate parts of that learning. And what I mean by that is it's what happens between a teacher and the student or the students in the classroom, and there's no amount of outside individuals that can come in and change that dynamic. My role is to create the system and the structure for that to
Yeah.
happen. Create efficient procedures for people to operate within that don't deter from what needs to happen in the classroom. Because ultimately, what I need a teacher who's well versed, well equipped, understands kids, understands social emotional development, understands when kids are expressing behavior challenges, um, and teach concepts and skills. The challenge that we see nowadays is kids are coming with really high needs. They're coming with things. We've been through a pandemic. Um, you know, we're doing something online right now, which was foreign for a lot of people. When
Yeah.
now it becomes almost how we tend to operate. We see children who struggle with social emotional connection because of some of those things. Um, so when people are looking for a magic program or a magic anything, it's really not. It's that relational piece and understanding. If I'm trying to learn something and you're my teacher, we need to go through that consistent process and
Yeah.
know where if it's not working, how to be intentional with our scaffolds and supports with an effort to get back that I'm going to remove them. And that's very time consuming. And it's very complex. It's very complex to happen.
Yeah, I mean the relational piece is obviously so crucial. I mean, I believe it or not, 2020 was the spring of my junior year in high school and the fall of my senior year. And after my junior year, the high school that I was at for the previous 3 years shut down and went bankrupt. It was a private school. I was there for sports, and so we had to transfer. So my friends and I transferred to a big public school in the area, and I was in that district growing up. It was just those first 3 years of high school. I went somewhere else, but transferred into that public high school. And it was like when it was hybrid learning, right? So people could
Yeah.
choose to stay home or people could choose to go to school. And I wanted to go to school because I was new to the high school. Like I didn't know anyone there, but we're all wearing masks and we're like 6 feet apart. And I remember thinking like, I'm a pretty social person. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, no one in this classroom like wants to socialize. Like what's going on right now? It was really weird, especially being in a new school. You know what I mean? It's not like it was people I knew that was like, I'll talk to you later. Like, no, like I actually don't know your name, you know? So it's a very, very interesting experience. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. The relational piece is everything, right? But I want to target one piece of that you said, right? Your role as assistant superintendent educational services is to put the systems and structure in place to avoid what we were talking about before,
Cor-
right? A crutch becoming permanent.
Correct.
How do you do that? Like, what do those systems and structures look like? Whether it's from a measuring efficacy standpoint or an accountability standpoint, like how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's really the work that we're doing each day. When I first started, there was a lot of um, what you call individual practice, right? So and that's where you get pockets of just excellence. You get individual teachers who in their classroom, they've they have that magic. You walk in, you feel welcome in their classroom. The kids are engaged. Um, Everyone is positively interacting. You see that they're adapting their instruction based on the needs of the student, and there is a level of natural talent, right? Like sports,
Mhm.
there's a level of natural talent where there's certain teachers who really can click. My role in that structure in the system is how do I replicate that? How do I put something in place where if you and I both walk in the classroom to observe what's going on, we're able to recognize what is working effectively, quantify that in a way, and then be able to go and then share and show somebody else that, hey, this is what we need to do. And so my system and structure that we've been working to create as a team is we want that to be something that's really quite global. Um, and I know you've heard this term before because I listened to one of your prior podcasts, but defined autonomy, right? Where, in other words, there's a structure that we all have to live within, and it actually should be pretty comprehensive. But then my role is to figure out which parts of that structure are what I need right now in this moment as the teacher to work with my student. And it might vary from student by student, grade by grade, but the overall big box still stays intact. You hear the phrase "think outside the box." I really operate more from a premise of there's more creativity if you think inside the box, because what's happening is if we live within the structure of we know here's everything that would work in a classroom, you get to pick and be as creative as you can with what we know works. Because if you go out to try to do something that we know doesn't work, which in education, we know what doesn't work, um, then what's happening is you're trying to make something fit that really won't lead to the results that we want. So that system and structure that I create is defining that and then putting process in place where we conduct consistent learning walks. We support our administrators during those learning walks. We calibrate around common language and common expectations. We support giving intentional feedback for growth that's from a coaching model, not from an evaluative model. Because back to that free throw analogy, if you're trying to lead a certain piece of instruction, and I've seen that you keep doing it wrong, the most simple one I've shared is I'm going to teach you how to pronounce the word cat. And I'll watch teachers go, cut, 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 ta, 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 ta. That's not accurate. That's not going to help with that orthographic mapping for students because when you read, you're not seeing cut, 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 right? So um, that's what I'm talking about. The system and structure is being really intentional with identifying what's working, We want to replicate that, identifying what needs to be tweaked with that feedback, but all couched within a model that is based on research and evidence that we know works to help students learn.
Interesting. Can you repeat for me the like thinking outside the box versus thinking inside the box? Because as an entrepreneur, in my mindset, that's a controversial statement, but I think I get what you're saying. Can you kind of reword it?
I absolutely can. So you just have a bigger box.
Oh wow.
So, it's the Apollo 13 approach. If the spaceship was, there and you only have what's available to you to get results, then what has to happen is your creativity and the way you try to make the things that exist be different or be provide a better result is absolutely where your energy goes. Um, as an entrepreneur, so if you're in an area where you're trying to think of, I want to start up a business, you could say I want to start a business in 1,000 different ways, which could lead to lots of ideas. But what starts to happen is you start to define your own box once you start to say, I really want to work in podcasts. And so then from podcasts, you start to define your own box where now you're saying, well, I want to be the best podcast in what? And so you start to create your structure as an entrepreneur on your own. And if you're
Interesting.
thinking on how you're gonna learn something new that you've never experienced, um, like reading, then I need that structure to be pretty consistent based on what we know already works. If I'm saying, well, go think of all kinds of creative ways to teach kids to read, what's happening is we're going to spend a lot of time chasing other things that might work for some kids, but hasn't been proven to work for all students. Um, when we say we want 100% of students to read at third grade, if we really mean it, then what we need to do is be super intentional with what we're doing
Yeah.
and promote practices that absolutely work.
Yeah.
When you get older, yeah, then the box starts to expand for students because we've helped them with those essential skills that they need to be like you and go out and be an entrepreneur and then define your own box.
Yeah.
So I hope that
I
helped.
like that. Yeah, no, that definitely helps. The idea of defining your own box, right? Maybe there's two boxes. Maybe there's the box that like other people think are in your mind, and then there's the box that you create, right? I
And I
like
think
that.
when you see these innovative, you know, people throughout our life that have created products that shape the way that we live, like my phone, right?
Bluetooth.
Um, those are obviously individuals that just did to me what you described. They took their knowledge and skills and then they defined a new box that actually changes it for everybody. Um, but now think of what most of us do. We live within the box that someone else has created in the way we operate on our phone.
Yeah.
It's been someone else that kind of created the way. I mean, it's kind of funny when we say an operating system,
Yeah.
right? It's not endless. It can be, but for the most part, most of us tend to operate within those pieces. So
That's awesome. I like that. That's a disruptive framework that is probably going to keep me up a little bit. So I'll let you know when I get my sleep back. But one word you said earlier, we kind of skipped over it. Use the word metacognition. The actual first episode of Beyond the Syllabus was with Rich Cohen, Chief Academic Officer at Edison Township in New Jersey, and he is a expert on metacognition. Has done published papers, done research on it. We're working with him now on that topic. How does metacognition play into you said a little bit of it, but how does it play into the work that's going on today, and how do you think about that in the future?
great question. So go back to how people learn, right? So at the end, anything that someone's going to learn, the first step is if I'm providing instruction, I have to address preconceptions. And I have to address preconceptions before they become misconceptions, because misconceptions, now there's a different approach that I have to really break down because you have beliefs that are interrupting that learning. It has to be within a framework. So that's what I talked about, that conceptual framework where there is a structure for how people learn. I need to connect it to prior knowledge, or if I don't have prior knowledge, then right, I need to build that schema. So if I mention coming from Idaho, if I mention the 27 different ways you could describe snow, uh, there's a lot of people. If you've never been in a winter environment, they would have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
you probably learned a lot going from here to New York, right? Just the
Yep.
ways you can describe, flakes coming from the sky. So, but that's that contextual framework. Um, and then we know it's collaborative. Even if I'm learning by myself, I'm engaging with something. Whether I'm watching a video, reading a book, it's still there's an interaction. That highest level is the metacognition, where I'm actually able not to rely on feedback from other people, whether or not I'm learning what I'm trying to learn. I can actually measure my own understanding through that reflective process of, does this make sense? Can I teach it to another person? Can I reframe it and generate something new? Back to your entrepreneurship, right? You take all those knowledge and skills and things you've learned, and when you have metacognition, now you're able to produce something with all that information that you have. So in our world, that's what we're chasing. We want our students, when we say they're college and career ready, I want students that we know we've provided them with enough experiences to demonstrate metacognition. So when they're making a decision on, do I want to go to a college or university, a community college, a career path, they know why, and it's something that they understand, and that they've got to that through those experiences, and then say, I really enjoy welding. We have a great welding program in San Jacinto. I've learned so much about welding, and I know if I'm doing welding and something starts to go wrong, I now know what to do to be safe, right?
Yeah.
That's metacognition for me. It's defined for me as students owning their own learning at that stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. And student ownership and self-efficacy is so important. Something I talk about a lot, right? I mean, thinking back to my time in elementary, middle, high school, it feels like everything is like done to you or done
Correct.
at you, right?
Correct.
There's not a lot of like opportunity to drive what you are going to do at that age. And I think that's super important, not only from an engagement standpoint, right? I mean, I'm bored because you're telling me what I need to do, and I don't
Yeah.
like what you're telling me I need to do, right?
Correct.
So that's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is it's such an important skill to be able to sit down and think like, okay, what should I do right now?
Correct.
How should I do it? Why am I doing it? Right? But we can't build those skills if we're not given the opportunity to do that. So
Well,
I think
you
that's
said
super,
earlier, putting in the repetitions. So
exactly.
the classroom for me becomes a safe environment for that to happen.
Yep.
It's to go through that learning process in a safe environment where I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to screw up, I'm going to get it wrong. And there's a mentor or a coach or a professional educator who's there to say, hold on, well, wait a minute, let's think about this. And that's where the scaffolds come in to provide that support. And then as you show you're able to do it, then I'm able to pull back on those scaffolds a little bit. And in the end, now I'm ready to release you and you're independent. That is literally the arc of instruction, right? I model it, and then I practice it with you until and then I slowly release to where now you're doing it completely independent of
Mhm.
other support. And then now you're able to monitor and say, this is working, it's not working for me. And then you start to make adjustments on your own.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I love it. Let's transition this into our time of dreams and visions.
Oh, love it.
What in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, what is like your disruptive big change vision for education?
Oh wow, disruptive big change vision. I know that in the end, we're all dealing with artificial intelligence right now.
Yeah.
I think that's a disruptor uh, and just like when the internet. I'm young enough to. I mean, I'm old enough. Sorry, you're not. You're young enough. You probably don't remember when the internet was around, right? So, I
No.
mean, I do. I remember my first, Windows 3.0 or whatever it was, and dial up and all those things. To me, artificial intelligence, it's a tool that we need to learn how to harness in a productive way that doesn't actually break down everything we've already talked about.
Yeah.
If I rely on someone else um, to do my learning for me, so take the scaffold part. If we allow AI to be a scaffold that becomes permanent, then it actually doesn't become a tool anymore.
Yeah.
It becomes part of that original structure. So
Yep.
the biggest challenge I see, and when I talk to some of my colleagues, maybe a little controversial because I really believe it is about providing students learning opportunities that they can use AI as a tool, but we're still forcing them to go through that deeper thinking process of metacognition.
Yeah.
As I shouldn't put into chat GTP and say, is this answer right? I should know if it's right or not. It's that estimating, that's where that starts. When I learn to estimate um, in math, I'm actually learning a level of metacognition because I'm trying to determine, am I close enough?
Yeah.
Does the answer make sense? Can I
Yeah.
reverse it and go backwards? Um, so I think that the biggest disruptor for me, and if we really want to talk about changing the landscape of education and society, is schools and districts and communities really ensuring that 100% of our students are reading. When I'm in an environment where we still have, unfortunately, students in high school that are struggling with foundational reading still, that to me is a disservice. It's a disservice to the community. Um, and it's not that you can go and say it's a person's fault, it's the system's fault.
Yeah.
And so the disruptor I'd like to see is that we really have a system that 100% ensures that every student's able to read. Um, and I wanted to touch on something else, just to bridge over back for a second, because we were talking about a couple different things, but I don't know if you're familiar with the SAMR model of technology.
Mm-mm.
So it's something that you can look up. It's SAMR, and it
Mm-hmm.
stands for substitution, augmentation, um, modification, and then redefinition. And similar to how people learn, what we want people to be able to do with technology is move to the level of redefinition. You use it to create something new. Um, and I think to get to that level, the disruptor has to be I have to understand the basics so that then I can move to the more advanced levels. Um, and so that's where I see those two things going together.
I love that. I am gonna spend some time reading about that. I appreciate that shout out. Well, listen, John, this has been an amazing conversation. Any final shout outs to the community, to the district? Where can people find you? Final thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can find our district just by Googling San Jacinto Unified School District, and you'll find all kinds of things. My social media all falls under Mr. John Roach. Surprisingly, there must not be another one of them out there that's on social media. Definitely a shout out to just my educational services team, the structure that they've been building for the past 6-7 years along this journey with me. We have just an amazing group of teachers in our district that are hardworking, um, dedicated to the students in the community and to the families. And one of the most motivating things for me is when I go back and look at presentations or conversations or things that I was trying to lead when I first came in the district versus now, the depth and complexity of the collaboration and the conversation is noticeably different, quantifiably different of the things that people are talking about and the way that people are utilizing our resources differently. Um, and the great news is we're seeing results in our district. So we have been a district that typically is either kind of regressed or flatline. And as our results are coming out publicly, as of yesterday, and then when they released the dashboard in California, we're seeing systemic growth, meaning we're seeing across all schools in the district growth in English language arts, mathematics, college and career readiness, CTE completion, um, even in our chronic absenteeism, it being reduced. So what that sends to us as a district is we know we're on the right path. We know that when we're able to put centralized systems and structures in place and then really promote that defined autonomy, um, living within the box, it will produce results for kids. And so when kids win, community wins, and then ultimately we get a better society. So just appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk and get to meet you through online. Exciting to see someone your age reaching out and learning a lot and kind of building this platform. So appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir. Yes, sir. Well, listen, I'm along the journey with you, and we're working towards a very similar mission here. So, cheers to all the work you guys are doing, and I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Got an idea, a story, or a question about what we discussed today? We'd love to hear from you. To learn more about Unique Learn, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, and visit uniquelearn.co.